music.
The station relaxing piano radio.
Okay, guys, so we are gonna be doing a reading challenge because next week is reading World Book Day. So that's we're gonna be doing a lot of reading from now on. It's not all about the Bible and stuff. So it's gonna be random stuff that we will just read, and share what we have read as well. Yeah. And then we'll talk about reflections probably at the end as well or during.
So this is our reading journal. So if you want, you could use this template if you want to make your own. You can just screenshot it and you can make your own if you want to follow a reading challenge like us. But you can, but if you want, you can also get a planner that has like the same layout because we just use a planner for this one. But so basically what you do, if you have some books that you want to, if you have like a plan already, like a game plan of books you want to read, you could put it in the to-do list for the books. But if you don't and you're like us, you just go with the flow. So when it says day and date, you just write like day 1 and then or whatever day you're on, and then you write the date. And then there are different times, and they're like split into like hours, like see, this one's 6 and then the next one's 7. So if you want, you could have an hour to read a book. It's like, it depends on how fast you are, but it's okay. So yeah, so you basically write the title of your book here on the line, and then you write a text, and you put a little box there, and you tick it once you've done it. Or you could use a different ticking off system, but that's not.
Can you pass me the other phone? I'm gonna check if we can be heard, if the audio is okay.
Yeah. So that's what you're doing.
All right. So before we start, we're just gonna check the audio. We want to make sure we can be heard. Don't want to waste our time. We need to establish audio. Make sure the audio is working.
But yeah, and again with this one. For us, for the notes, you can actually put any notes you want. But for us, we just put the code. Yeah, we have a code because we're kind of alternating throughout the day, me and Daisy. So I have a code. She's purple and I'm yellow, so that's how we know, and then we just highlight, the different colors. So yeah, if you're doing it with someone else, then you can also do it like that. But if you're doing it by yourself, that's okay as well. You don't have to do the code thing. But yeah, all right, let's start. And after we read the book, don't forget to take it off. All right, let's start. Bye bye.
Right.
Tell me when you finish.
So, Sweet Valley Twins, a Bantam Skylark book, book 36, created by Francine Pascal. How can a 12-year-old girl disappear into thin air? Mary is missing. I'm going to skip this, guys. I don't want to read that anymore. So, we're not going to read in order, guys. It'll be just random. And then we'll just probably reorder it when we edit or manage our videos. So it's nice that you don't know what you're expecting. Chapter 1. With a frown, Jessica Wakefield pushed a pile of clothes, record albums, and magazines off her bed. She sat down and dialed Mary Wallace's number. Mary hadn't been at school for the past few days. Of course, that wasn't so bad. She could always make up her schoolwork. But it was too bad that she had missed Lila's after-school ice cream party the previous day. And worst of all, she had missed an important unicorn meeting where she was supposed to give the treasurer's report. Jessica was worried. Mary would never have missed such an important meeting unless she was very sick. Jessica waited impatiently while the phone rang 2, 3, 4 times. Finally, just when she was ready to hang up, Mary's mother answered. "Hello," Jessica said in her most polite voice. "This is Jessica Wakefield. I'd like to speak to Mary, please." It took a moment for Mrs. Wallace to reply. I'm sorry, Jessica, she finally said. She sounded a little bit sad. Mary's not home. Jessica was surprised. Not home? She's not in the hospital, is she? She blurted out. No, she isn't in the hospital. Mrs. Wallace sighed after a short pause. Jessica waited, hoping Mrs. Wallace would tell her where Mary was and why she hadn't been at school. But when Mrs. Wallace didn't offer any explanation, Jessica went on. Can you tell me when she'll be back or where I can reach her? She asked. I have to talk to her about something really important. Oh, I'm sorry, Jessica. I'm afraid Mary can't be reached, Mrs. Wallace replied curtly. Jessica bit her lip. Oh, okay. Well, please tell her I called. She hung up. She sat staring at the phone for a few minutes. Not only was she beginning to get worried, but she was curious too. Where was Mary? And why was her mother acting so strange? Mrs. Wallace was usually very friendly. The whole thing seemed mysterious, Jessica thought. Very mysterious indeed. Lizzie, where are you? Jessica yelled as she came charging onto the patio. With a sigh, Elizabeth Wakefield put her finger in her book to mark her page. Her twin sister Jessica was calling her, and she knew her peace and quiet was about to end. Out here, Elizabeth called back. At the thinking seat. Jessica came toward her across the backyard and pulled herself up onto the low branch where Elizabeth was already sitting. Really, Lizzie, she said, tossing her long blonde hair over her shoulder. I don't know why you insist on hanging around under this old tree. Elizabeth couldn't help smiling. For years, the huge pine tree had been their favorite place to read and talk and play. It was their own secret hideout. Now that she was older, Jessica didn't have any time to spend on the thinking seat, as they called it. But the old tree was still one of Elizabeth's favorite spots, especially when she had a new Amanda Howard mystery to read. On the outside, the Wakefield twins were identical. Both had long blonde hair, blue-green eyes, and dimples in their left cheeks. It was almost impossible to tell them apart, but inside they were very different. Jessica belonged to the Unicorn Club, an exclusive group of girls who thought they were as special and as beautiful as the mythical beast for which they were named. Every day the unicorns tried to wear something purple, the color of royalty. Jessica was also a member of the Boosters, the middle school cheering squad that was mostly made up of unicorn members. The unicorns' favorite activities were talking about clothes and the most popular, best-looking boys, listening to rock music and shopping at the Valley Mall. Jessica was impulsive and a great schemer, but more often than not, her schemes backfired, and Elizabeth had to come to her rescue. Elizabeth was as different from Jessica as she could be. She cautiously thought everything through before deciding to do anything. The two girls sometimes joked that Elizabeth was more responsible because she was the older twin by 4 whole minutes. And Elizabeth was more responsible because she was the older twin by 4 whole minutes. Am I repeating myself? And Elizabeth frequently felt that those 4 minutes were more like 4 years. But whatever the reason, Elizabeth was certainly more serious than Jessica. At school, she was the editor of the Sweet Valley Sixers, the 6th grade student newspaper. She also enjoyed writing and hoped to be a journalist someday. She had even gotten an electric typewriter on her last birthday, a gift that Jessica thought was extremely boring. Elizabeth loved to read as much as she loved to write, and mysteries and horror stories were her favorites. Now, she opened her book again, hoping Jessica would take the hint and let her get back to her story. Jessica made a face. Put your book down and listen, Lizzie, she commanded. We've got a problem, a big problem. Elizabeth sighed and closed the book again. Whenever Jessica wanted help solving a problem, it was always their problem. Okay, Jess, she said. What is it? What's the problem? It's Mary. Elizabeth looked at Jessica. For the most part, the twins chose very different friends. But Mary happened to be a friend they shared. Jessica and the other unicorns thought Elizabeth's best friend, Amy Sutton, was a tomboy. Elizabeth thought most of Jessica's friends were snobs, and she thought Lila Fowler, Jessica's best friend, was the biggest snob of all. But Jessica knew that Elizabeth would be as concerned about Mary as she was, just as soon as she told her sister what was going on. What's wrong with Mary? Elizabeth asked. Is she sick or something? Jessica threw up her hands. That's just it, she said dramatically. I don't know what's wrong with her. She hasn't been in school. I thought she was sick. So I called her house. But her mother said she wasn't home and wouldn't tell me where she is or when she's coming back either. I think Mary's missing. Elizabeth frowned. She wished Jessica wasn't always so theatrical. I know she hasn't been at school for a couple of days, she said patiently, but I hardly think. She missed Lila's ice cream party yesterday. Maybe she just didn't feel like eating ice cream, Elizabeth said. Really, Jess? I don't see why. Jessica held up her hand. And she missed the unicorn meeting this afternoon, she said, with exaggerated emphasis. What a tragedy, Elizabeth remarked with a hint of sarcasm in her voice. It was a very important meeting, Jessica continued, ignoring her twins' comment. We think we got nearly $50 in the treasury, enough for a big party. But we can't decide what to do until we know exactly how much money we've got. Mary's the only one who knows, and she was supposed to give us the treasurer's report today. She promised she would be there. She's never let us down. Elizabeth was beginning to understand Jessica's concern. Mary was reliable. She could always count on her to do what she said she was going to do, and Elizabeth knew that Mary took her job as a unicorn's treasurer very seriously. She didn't let anybody know that she wasn't going to be at the meeting, she asked. Jessica shook her head. Nobody's heard a word from her in 3 days. She lowered her voice. Lizzie, you don't think she might have run away, do you? Elizabeth knew that was precisely what Jessica was thinking. A few days before, Mary had told them both in the strictest confidence that she and her mother had been arguing a lot lately. Not about anything special, but about a lot of different things, big and small. The twins fell silent, thinking about Mary. She had had a very eventful life, just like a story in a book or a movie. When Mary was young, one of her mother's friends, Annie Del Salvo, kidnapped her. Annie had kept Mary for a long time, pretending she was her own daughter. And then one day, Annie disappeared. Mary was forced to live with several foster families after that, until she finally moved in with the Altmans, a couple who had no children of their own, and lived down the street from the Wakefields. Mary loved the Altmans and was very happy with them, but she always believed that someday her real mother would find her. And Mary was right. Her mother searched for her for years before she finally found her. And then the two of them settled in Sweet Valley. Recently, Mary's mother had remarried. The twins knew that Mary got along well with her stepfather, Tim, and he had been helping her resolve her differences with her mother. But he had gone to Santa Barbara for a few weeks to do some carpentry work on an old house that was being restored. Now, Mary and her mother were alone together, and that meant an argument nearly every day. I don't think Mary would run away, Elizabeth said, considering Jessica's question seriously. I know she's been having trouble with her mom lately, but that's because they're still getting used to each other after being separated for so long. I'm sure they'll work it out, but she's gone, Jessica argued, and nobody knows where. Her mother must know, Elizabeth pointed out reasonably. If she knows, she's not telling. Jessica leaned closer to her sister. In fact, she acted very strange on the phone. She sounded upset, and I have a feeling she didn't want me to know why. Elizabeth sighed. If you ask me, Jess, your imagination is working overtime again. She opened her book. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to finish this chapter, she said firmly. This is an excellent mystery. Jessica made a sour face at Elizabeth. Sometimes I don't understand you, Lizzie. How can you sit there with your nose in a book when you've got a real mystery to solve? Elizabeth just smiled. For a second, Jessica stared at her twin, shaking her head. Then she turned and marched across the yard and into the house. Amy Sutton was humming one of her favorite songs to herself as she walked down the street. She was on her way to Mary Wallace's house. Mary had promised to type an article that Amy had written for the next edition of the Sweet Valley Sixters, and Elizabeth needed it as soon as possible. Amy had been looking for Mary for 2 days to remind her that the article was due, but Mary was nowhere to be found. And Amy had overheard Jessica Wakefield and Lila Fowler saying that Mary had missed Lila's ice cream party the day before. The only explanation was that Mary was at home with a cold or something. Amy thought it would be a nice visit. It would be nice to visit Mary and see how she was feeling, and at the same time check up on her article. As Amy turned the corner onto Mary Street, she saw Lila Fowler and Ellen Reitman coming toward her. Lila and Ellen were both members of the Unicorn Club. Amy wasn't particularly friendly with any of the unicorns except for Mary, and was one of the few non-members on the booster squad. Amy thought most of the unicorns were stuck up and silly, but she tried not to be mean to them since she did have to go to booster practices with them. All they ever thought about was how pretty and how popular they were, without caring whether anybody outside their club really liked them. In fact, they had tried to keep Amy off the boosters during tryouts earlier in the year. Their efforts had backfired when Amy turned out to be the best baton twirler in the 6th grade. Baton twirler in the 6th grade. She made the squad in spite of the unicorns, and that was something for which Lila and Ellen would never forgive her. "Hello, Amy," Lila said as they approached. She tossed her light brown hair over her shoulder. "Are you going to Mary's house?" she demanded. "Yes," Amy said. "As a matter of fact, I'm on my way there right now." "Well, don't bother," Lila said in a lofty, know-it-all voice. "Why not?" Amy asked. "Mary is my friend, too, even if she's a unicorn," she added silently to herself. Ellen lifted her nose. "You'd be wasting your time," she said in a tone that matched Lila's. Mary's not there. "Not there?" Amy asked. "But I thought she was sick." "So did we," Ellen said with a glance at Lila. "So did everybody else, as a matter of fact. But it appears that she's not sick. She's just not there, that's all. And her mother's not saying anything about where she might be." Suddenly, Amy felt a little worried. Where could Mary be, she thought to herself. And where is my Sixers article? At 5:30, Elizabeth went inside and began to put plates on the table in the Wakefield Spanish-style kitchen. She was putting the forks out when her 14-year-old brother Stephen came into the room and took 2 slices of bread out of the basket in the middle of the table. He had a faraway look in his eye, and Elizabeth couldn't help smiling. She knew what that meant. Stephen was thinking about Laura, the pretty brown-haired girl he had invited home for dinner a couple of days ago. Stephen had become preoccupied and absent-minded a lot recently. Just then, the telephone rang. "I'll get it," Jessica called from upstairs. At the same instant, Stephen shouted, "I'll get it," and went flying for the phone on the wall. Elizabeth's smile broadened. Every time Stephen became interested in a new girl, there would always be a race to see whether he or Jessica would get to the phone first. This time, Jessica must have beaten him, because a few seconds later she called, "Mom, it's for you." Stephen turned to Elizabeth. "Speaking of the phones," he said, "I sort of remember that I was supposed to give you a message, or maybe it was for Jess." Elizabeth sighed. It was a strict family rule that they were supposed to write down all phone messages, but Stephen usually forgot. And lately, with Laura always on his mind, He was even worse than usual. Stephen scratched his head. Someone called a couple of days ago. I think it was some girl. You took a telephone message 2 days ago and didn't tell us? Jessica demanded, coming into the kitchen. She sounded angry. Who was it? I don't know, Stephen said vaguely. I don't really remember. Some girl? She said to tell you something about money. She needed money and she had to get away. Or she had money and needed to get away, something like that. Stephen, Jessica wailed. It sounds like a very important message. How could you have forgotten? Stephen scowled. Listen, you guys get tons of calls. How do you expect me to remember all of them? He turned and started out of the room. That's why we're supposed to write them down, Elizabeth called after him as he walked away. The twins looked at each other. Elizabeth knew they were both asking themselves the same question. Could the call have been for Mary? Elizabeth, Jessica said, lowering her voice. You don't suppose that Mary needed the unicorn money for something, do you? She sounded very worried. Something like running away? Elizabeth shook her head. If Mary was in that kind of trouble, she'd come to us, she said. She wouldn't just take the money and go. Jessica nodded. She knew Elizabeth was right. It was dumb to think Mary might have taken the unicorn's money for any reason. Mary was much too honest to do something like that. But that didn't help to answer the questions that weighed on Jessica's mind. If it wasn't Mary who called, who was it? And where was Mary? Chapter 2. At school the next day, Jessica, Lila, and Ellen were eating their lunches as they read the edition of the Sweet Valley Sixers, which had been handed out that morning. I know it seems impossible, Ellen said, throwing down her paper, but there isn't a word about your ice cream party in this whole newspaper. I read every page twice, just to make sure. She frowned across the table at Jessica. Why didn't Elizabeth put something in the paper about Lila's party? Jessica? I was all Jessica could say before Lila interrupted her. And, Lila said, scowling over the top of her copy, there's not even an article about the letter I got from the Donny Diamond fan club. I told Elizabeth all about that letter. I even showed it to her. It had Donny Diamond's signature stamped on it. I thought Lila Fowler receives letters from Donny Diamond. Would have made a terrific headline. She gave Jessica a stern look. You know, I think the Sixers staff is leaving the unicorns out of the newspaper on purpose. Ellen nodded. I agree. Remember the party I had a couple of weeks ago in honor of Johnny Buck's birthday? The Sixers didn't cover that either, and it was one of the biggest social events of the year. The only explanation is that we're being deliberately discriminated against. Lila and Ellen both turned to Jessica with angry looks on their faces. Well, don't blame me, Jessica said. She folded her paper and stuck it into her notebook. I don't have anything to do with the Sixers. Elizabeth is the one who decides what to print. That is Elizabeth and the other newspaper staff members. That's exactly the problem, Lila exclaimed. Elizabeth and her friends have complete control over what goes into our class newspaper. And since Elizabeth doesn't like the unicorns, she shrugged elaborately. It's not exactly surprising that the unicorns never make the paper. That's right, Lila, Ellen cried. The only time we get a mention in the Sixers is when we sponsor some kind of fundraising event. It's almost as if the unicorns don't exist. It's not my fault, Jessica wailed. I tell Elizabeth absolutely everything the unicorns do. Well, almost everything, she added hastily, remembering that there were some important unicorn secrets that nobody outside the club was supposed to know about. Jessica turned to Ellen. I told Elizabeth all about your weekend in Santa Monica, and I told her about the cute boy we talked to at the mall, and I can't help it if there's not a word about any of it in the newspaper. I'm not surprised, Ellen said, because it's a plot against the unicorns. Well, Jessica replied, exasperated. If it's a plot, what exactly do you want to do about it? That, she thought to herself, should keep them quiet for a while. I think, Jessica, Lila announced, that you'd better talk to Elizabeth about this immediately. tell her we're very upset about the way she's ignoring the unicorns. But Jessica began. Don't tell her we think it's a plot. Lila went on. Not right away, anyway. First, we'll give her a chance to be fair. Oh, okay, Jessica said reluctantly. I'll talk to her. Jessica decided that it was time to change the subject. She looked around the crowded lunchroom. Have either of you seen Mary Wallace today? No, Lila said, I haven't. And I've been looking for her for days. Ellen and I even went over to her house yesterday afternoon, but her mother said she wasn't there. It really bugs me that she disappeared just when we needed her treasurer's report. I'm getting annoyed with her, aren't you? Jessica said. I guess, she agreed. But Jessica was more worried about Mary's disappearance than she was annoyed. Do you guys think I should go over to her house and see what I can find out? Jessica felt sure that if she went to Mary's, she would spot some clue about where she was. Maybe Mary was sick after all, and for some reason her mother didn't want people to know. Or maybe she had ran away. She had run away, but had left behind some kind of clue about where she was going. That's a very good idea, Jessica, Lila said approvingly. Do you think Mrs. Wallace would let you into Mary's room? Well, Jessica said, I'll have to think about a good reason, but I think she would. Why? What do you have in mind? You should try to get into her room, Ellen answered helpfully, and then search for the unicorn's treasury. Yes, that's a perfect plan, Lila said in a decisive tone. Go right after school and call me the minute you get home, she added, so you can tell me what you find. Jessica nodded. Okay, she said. Jessica had a feeling that Lila and Ellen were more interested in the treasury than they were in Mary, and in a way she could understand their point of view. Ever since Stephen had given her the confused message the night before, Jessica had been very worried about Mary. And even though she knew it was silly, she was still a tiny bit worried about the unicorn money. Jessica didn't think it would hurt to see what she could find in Mary's room, even though Elizabeth would definitely have said it was wrong to snoop through Mary's private things and wrong to doubt her friend. When school was over that afternoon, Jessica went straight to the Wallaces. Mrs. Wallace looked slightly startled when she answered the door. Why, hello, Jessica, she said. I wasn't expecting you. I stopped by to pick up a library book that Mary borrowed from me, Jessica said. It's due on Monday, and I'll be in trouble if I don't take it back. It was true. Mary had borrowed the book, and it was due on Monday. I wonder if I could go up to Mary's room and get it. Mrs. Wallace hesitated for a moment. Well, I guess so, she said reluctantly, opening the door and letting Jessica in. Do you think you can find it? Oh, I'm sure I can, Jessica said eagerly, heading for the stairs before Mrs. Wallace could change her mind. It's probably on her desk. Jessica dashed up the stairs and into Mary's room. It looks fairly normal, Jessica thought. There was a pile of books on the desk, and Jessica's library book was there, just as she'd expected. Mary's math homework was on the desk too, and if she'd been interrupted in the middle of it, as if she'd been interrupted in the middle of it. Quickly, Jessica went over to the desk and opened the top drawer. She knew that was where Mary kept her important things, and that was where she thought the unicorn treasury would be. But much to her disappointment, the money wasn't there. She found only old photographs and letters. Then Jessica looked around the room carefully. Something didn't seem quite normal. It took a second before she realized what it was. Mary was usually a very neat person, but the closet door and several dresser drawers were open. Clothes were pulled out, and some of them were tossed onto the bed, as if Mary had been sorting through them in a hurry. Jessica narrowed her eyes. She hated to admit it, but the homework on the desk, the clothes, the mess seemed to indicate that Mary had ran away. And then she saw something else, something that really surprised her. It was Max, Mary's teddy bear. The worn and tattered stuffed animal was sitting in his usual spot on Mary's pillow. If it were anybody but Mary, Jessica would probably have laughed at the idea of a 7th grader sleeping with a teddy bear every night, even when she went to stay overnight with friends. But Jessica understood why Mary needed the comfort of her dear old friend Max. Loving, faithful Max had been with her for all those years. Mary was separated from her mother, and he was with her still. That was what surprised Jessica. It looked very much as if Mary had run away, but why hadn't she taken Max with her? That question was still bothering Jessica an hour later, and she sat on the floor in her room listening to records and trying to decide what she should do. Lila was expecting her to call and tell her what she had found out, and there was so much she could tell Lila about Mary's messy room, the unfinished homework, and Max, but when she thought about it, Jessica realized that she couldn't tell Lila anything. She had promised Mary that she would never tell anyone about her problems with her mother. If she told Lila what she'd seen, Lila would probably come to the conclusion that Mary had run away. Ran away. Jessica was so deep in thought that she jumped when the telephone rang. She got up and walked into the hall to answer it. "Hello," she said absently. "Well," Lila demanded eagerly, "what did you find out?" Jessica hesitated. "Not much," she replied at last. "Did you get into Mary's room?" "Yes, but there wasn't much to see," Jessica answered. "Just some clothes and books and her teddy bear." It was the truth, Jessica told herself. It just wasn't the whole truth. Lila sighed. "You didn't find the unicorn treasury?" "No, I didn't." "Now I'm sure," Lila said firmly, "that something weird is going on. It's very strange that Mary disappeared just when she was supposed to give a report on the money in her treasury." Jessica took a deep breath. "Lila, what do you mean by that?" she asked. "Nothing," Lila replied. "All I know is that we'd better find that money, every penny of it." "Oh, don't worry," Jessica said breezily, with a little laugh. "As soon as we find Mary, she'll give us the treasurer's report and the money. It's silly to suspect." "Oh, I didn't say I suspected anything. Lila cut in. "You're jumping into conclusions." There was a pause, and then Lila said, "Jessica, are you sure you've told us everything you know about Mary? I mean, you don't know something that you're not telling us. I mean, you don't know something that you're not telling us, do you?" "Know something?" Jessica said innocently. "What in the world could I possibly know?" Lila wasn't convinced. "Jessica, if you know anything about Mary that would help us, you'd better tell. Don't forget your unicorn oath. Oath. You're supposed to be loyal to the unicorns." For a moment, Jessica felt guilty. Yes, she was a unicorn, and she was loyal. But Mary was a unicorn, too. She had to be loyal to Mary just as much as to the other unicorns. Anyway, she knew there was an explanation for Mary's absence. A good explanation. All she had to do was find it. For that, she would need more time. And to get more time, she would have to convince Lila that everything was just fine. Jessica did her best to imitate the tone Elizabeth used when she thought Jessica was exaggerating. "Don't be silly, Lila," she said. "You're making this little thing sound like a huge mystery. And it isn't a mystery at all. We'll find Mary before you know it, and there will be a good explanation for everything." Lila sighed. "I hope so, Jess," she said, but she still didn't sound completely convinced. After she said goodbye to Lila, Jessica put down the phone and sat thinking for a few minutes. Then she got up and went to find Elizabeth. Elizabeth stopped writing and looked up from her history homework. And when Jessica came into into her room. By the time Jessica had finished telling her what she had seen at Mary's that day, Elizabeth looked upset. "Mary's teddy bear was on her bed?" she asked. "Are you sure?" "Of course I'm sure," Jessica replied. "And not only that, but there were clothes all over the place. Her room was really messy." "Wow. That's not like Mary at all," Elizabeth said, chewing on the end of her pencil. "She's usually so neat. She always hangs everything up." "I know," Jessica sighed. "What do you think, Lizzie?" "I don't know what to think," she confessed. "It sounds like a mystery." "A real mystery," Jessica agreed. "Right. I am going to just put this here for a second, just because I'm feeling a bit cold. I want to wear something. Not that I'm not wearing anything. I'm going to add a bit more. I pulled the mic. I don't think I'm going to be able to do it in one go because the battery is not going to allow us to do it. So we're going to do maybe a couple of parts. Right, I'm back. Yeah, I don't think I made this into the child friendly because people are commenting here. I have to change the setting because this is for children. Um, yeah, I'm not gonna really read the comments because we're focused on, not that I'm being snobbish or anything, but we are focused on World Book Day, and this is our challenge. So we'll be reading books, any book that pops up. We'll just be reading, 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 and what we read after reading a certain book, we'll be donating it as well. So we've got a local train station that we can leave books, and then the passengers can just take it, and then they can read it, and they can swap and also donate their own books. So it's a nice thing that the community is doing, and we'd like to help as well. Saying that, we have a lot of secondhand books as well that we haven't read fully. We collected a bit, so we want to read and then also donate, so other people can read it, and at the same time, um, sharing it to our Daisy subscribers if they're interested to follow along or to just listen, and at the same time, I think it'll be quite entertaining for those who are keen. It's like a podcast. It's like an audiobook, really. So you don't really have to look at it. But some children that might come across this channel might want to look at the words as well. So that's why I'm putting the pages here on the screen so you can have a look as well. Um, I'm not a great reader myself, so this is also one way of practicing. That's why I'm gonna change. I'm gonna edit the title, and I don't want. I'm gonna be as humble as possible. I'm not here to, and we're not gonna earn anything because it's gonna be a child video, so it's not about that. It's more for the sharing. And as I said, if we do get to monetize again, because we used to monetize, then we didn't. So that's another story for another day. But if we do get to monetize again, we're planning to use the money for charity works and to help. We're going to be doing it for helping others, because the main objective of our channel is to learn and also to share, and to inspire, I suppose. Right. So I'm gonna have to maybe a couple more chapters. We'll see how the battery goes, and then we can assess as to how we split the book, because there's quite a few chapters in this book. Let me see how many chapters do they say. No, I don't think they do. I think let me see, we're roughly a third. I don't know how. We're hardly reaching half yet, but we'll see how it goes. We're gonna cross the bridge when we get there, as they say. So yeah, forgive me for pausing. I stopped at chapter 2 just because I needed to wear a jumper. It's actually really cold, and it was a bit nippy. So I'm wearing fuzzy socks now and a jumper. And I'm gonna be drinking some water as well, because as you can imagine, if you're reading a lot or talking a lot, you would have a dry throat at some point. If the weather is as nice as this, we might continue our puzzle making as well. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. So this is also in line, because next week is we're celebrating World Book Day. World Book Day. So, and that's also where we got the inspiration from. And this has been a plan ages ago, even before COVID, but we just don't have commitment. Our commitment's not as great as we have hoped for. Anyway, let us now continue chapter 3. So I'm going to change the setting, guys, so you don't have to comment. It's going to be restricted for children. And yeah, just enjoy. There was a word I wanted to go back to, because I can't really pronounce that one properly. I don't know if I can find it again. I don't know if it's worth going back. Or if I do see it again, then I might stop and just Google pronounce it, okay? So please bear with me. Right. just seeing the quality of our video, guys, because the light is nice today. So, pardon me. It's not too bad. Mind you, this book is a very old book, so you can see by the color. All right, here we go. Oops. What's this? I think I pressed something. Right, okay. Off we go. Chapter 3. Do you like this, Elizabeth? Jessica asked, holding up a long purple beaded necklace. It was Saturday and the twins were shopping at the Valley Mall. Elizabeth looked at the necklace. It wasn't the sort of thing she would buy, but she just nodded and said, "It looks like a unicorn necklace." "That's what I think too," Jessica said. "I'm going to get it." The twins had spent the morning doing what Jessica loved best, shopping. But Elizabeth noticed that Jessica didn't seem to be having a very good time. That could only mean one thing. She was still worrying about Mary. Around noon, the twins had hamburgers and chocolate milkshakes. After they finished eating, they walked around, looking in store windows. Then Elizabeth suggested that they go to the movies. Jessica brightened up at once. "Hey, that's a great idea," she exclaimed. "I want to see the new Brent Baines movie. Janet Howell says it's terrific. And it's a mystery. Your favorite," Jessica teased her twin. "Great," Elizabeth agreed enthusiastically. "I wonder when the next show starts." Let's go buy a newspaper," Jessica said. Elizabeth looked around. "Hey, Jess," she pointed to a folded up paper lying on a nearby bench. "There's a paper." "Wow, what luck," Jessica said, picking up the newspaper and removing the movie section. The girl sat down on the bench. While Jessica was looking for the movie time, Elizabeth picked up the other section of the paper and glanced at it. "That's funny," she said. "What?" Jessica asked absently, running her finger down the movie listings. "There are holes in this paper. Somebody's been clipping little pieces out of it." Jessica shrugged. "So what? Somebody clipped out an article, that's all. Or maybe a picture. People cut up newspapers all the time." "But words have been clipped out," Elizabeth said. She showed Jessica one of the pages. "See? The first word in this headline is missing. Isn't that weird?" "Well, at least the movie page is all here," Jessica said with satisfaction. "That's all we care about." "I know, but who would go to the trouble of cutting out all these words?" Elizabeth wondered out loud. "And why?" She started to look through the newspaper again. If one of Amanda Howard's heroines had found something like this, it would probably be a clue to a mystery. She would probably sit right down and figure out which words were missing. The missing word in the headline, for instance. That word had to be police, Elizabeth decided, because the headline read, "Arrest man for jaywalking." "Terrific," Jessica suddenly exclaimed. She threw the movie section into the trash can beside the bench. "The movie's starting in 10 minutes. Come on, Lizzie, quit fooling around with that paper and let's go." "Okay," Elizabeth said. She started to throw the rest of the paper away, but then, on an impulse, she folded it up and tucked it into her backpack. It might be kind of fun to figure out the missing words, she thought. "That was great," Jessica exclaimed as the twins walked out of the theater a couple of hours later. She sighed. "I just love Brent Baines. He's so cute, don't you think, Elizabeth?" Before Elizabeth could answer, Lila Fowler and Ellen Reitman walked up to them. "Hello," Lila said. "Hi, Jess. Hi, Elizabeth," Ellen said, but Elizabeth didn't think she looked too friendly. "Hi," Jessica said. Elizabeth gave her a quick glance. Her twin didn't look too happy about bumping into Lila and Ellen. And that was unusual. "Have you heard from Mary yet?" Lila asked. Jessica bit her lip. "Not yet," she said, and then she changed the subject. "Are you on your way to see this movie? Brent Baines is so great." "I'm surprised you didn't want to go to the movies with us, Jessica," Lila said. "You knew we were going today. You're not avoiding us, are you?" "Why would I do that?" Jessica asked. Elizabeth noticed that she sounded a little guilty. Maybe because you knew something about where Mary is and you don't want to tell us, Ellen said. That is, maybe you know where Mary went with the unicorn treasury, Lila added. Elizabeth frowned. Hey, she said, you're not suggesting that Mary took that money, are you? Lila gave her an icy smile. Actually, Elizabeth, we're discussing unicorn business. That's right, Ellen chimed in. And you're not a unicorn. Elizabeth nodded. Ellen was right. She wasn't a unicorn. Of course, she'd been invited to join at the same time that Jessica had. But when she turned the invitation down, Lila and Ellen probably held it against her. That's not important, Jessica said. What's important is that we find Mary so she can clear all this up. Lila nodded. That's right, Jessica, she said loftily. That's exactly what we keep telling her. That's exactly what we keep telling you. We have to find Mary so she can clear all this up. Ellen leaned forward, watching Jessica intently. You know, Jessica, this is important unicorn business, she said. If you know something about Mary and the treasure and you're hiding it, you're as guilty as Mary is. Jessica squirmed. Oh, don't be silly, she scoffed. She was smiling, but Elizabeth thought she looked nervous. After all, she was hiding something. Elizabeth knew Jessica hadn't mentioned anything to Lila and Ellen about Mary's problems with her mother or about what she saw at Mary's house. Elizabeth was proud of Jessica for keeping her promise to Mary. Besides, Jessica added, who said that Mary is guilty or anything. Of anything. After a minute or two, Lila and Ellen said goodbye and went into the movie. Jessica turned to Elizabeth with an uneasy laugh. Lila and Ellen don't really think Mary took the money, she said. Everybody knows how serious and responsible Mary is about the money. That's why the unicorns elected her treasurer. But Elizabeth didn't feel reassured. What Lila and Ellen thought seemed clear to her. They thought Mary was a thief. It made her angry that anyone would think such a thing about her friend. She was sure Mary hadn't done anything wrong. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't come up with a good explanation for Mary's disappearance. Later that afternoon, Elizabeth remembered the newspaper she'd put put into her book bag. She got it out and laid it down in front of her on her desk. She could figure out some of the clipped out words quickly, but some of the others seemed impossible. Elizabeth concentrated on the paper for a long time, and suddenly she had a brilliant idea. She checked the date on the newspaper and then went downstairs to the den, where she found the Sweet Valley newspaper from the day before on the coffee table. She grabbed the paper, ran upstairs again, laid the two papers side by side, and began to compare them. On page 1, the word safe had been clipped out, and the word call down at the bottom of the page was gone. And on the third page, you're curious. Elizabeth reached for a pad of paper. Now again, the will be was gone. And on the third page, you're curious. Elizabeth reached for a pad of paper and began to write down the missing words. When she'd finished, there were 12 words on the list. Safe, call, will be, your, police, daughter, soon, in, don't, is, touched. Elizabeth leaned forward eagerly. She loved word games and was very good at them. Let's see, she said to herself. How can I make a sentence out of these words? After several tries, Elizabeth sat back in her chair and stared at the message she had printed in big letters across her yellow pad. Your daughter is safe. We'll be in touch soon. Don't call police. Her heart was beating fast, and she was almost breathless with astonishment. Just then, Jessica burst into Elizabeth's room. Liz, we need to talk, she began in a rush. I just called Mrs. Wallace to check on Mary, and she... Elizabeth turned around. Come here, Jess, she said, surprised by the tone in her sister's voice. Jessica went over to the desk where Elizabeth was sitting. Look, Elizabeth said, pointing at the pad. Jessica sighed. I'll look at it later, Elizabeth. I have something important to tell you. Mrs. Wallace was almost rude to me on the phone just now. Rude? Elizabeth asked, surprised. Yes, she said she wasn't sure when Mary would be back, and then she told me not to call again. Can you believe it? Elizabeth shook her head. That's not like Mrs. Wallace at all, she said slowly. No, it isn't, Jessica agreed. I think something's wrong. I can't imagine why Mrs. Wallace wouldn't tell us where Mary is. Again, Elizabeth pointed at the pad of paper. Maybe I know why. Remember that newspaper we found this afternoon? I'd figured out which words are missing. If you make a sentence out of them, this is what they say. Jessica bent over to read. Your daughter is safe. We'll be in touch soon. Don't call police, she gasped. Liz! It sounds like a kidnapper's note. That's exactly what it sounds like, Elizabeth said grimly. Jessica looked back at the paper. When she spoke, her voice was a whisper. The only person we know who is missing, she said faintly, is Mary. She looked up at her twin, her eyes wide. Lizzie, do you think Mary has been kidnapped? Right. So let's see. How long is chapter 4? Kasi it's almost an hour now. I'm thinking we'll maybe we can. Maybe we can. We got 9 minutes. Okay, let's try. Okay, we're gonna do hourly ones, I think, just so we can charge the phone, we can cool it down a bit, and it's all balanced out nicely. Okay, chapter 4. Let's keep going. Elizabeth shook her head. I don't know what to think, she said slowly, looking down at the pad of paper. The words don't make sense any other way, at least not that I can see, but it's awfully hard to believe that we could just stumble over a kidnapper's note. I mean, it's like something out of an Amanda Howard mystery. Things like this just don't happen in real life. Yes, they do, Jessica exclaimed. Now, it all makes sense. Somebody kidnapped Mary and sent her mother this note. That's why Mrs. Wallace is so upset. I bet she's afraid that if she talks to anyone, she'll put Mary's life in danger. It's the only logical explanation, Elizabeth. Elizabeth had learnt the hard way to be suspicious of Jessica's logical explanations, and in this case, Jessica's explanation was pretty far-fetched. Elizabeth was a logical, down-to-earth person, and to her, it seemed unbelievable that the two of them would stumble onto something as big as this. But she had to agree that the facts appeared to support Jessica's explanation. First, Mary was missing. Second, her mother was terribly upset about something, and there was the note on the desk right in front of them. Your daughter is safe. We'll be in touch soon. Don't call police. I think, Elizabeth said slowly, that we ought to call the police and tell them about this. Jessica shook her head. No, Lizzie, she said forcefully. That's exactly what the kidnapper says not to do. If the police start looking for Mary, the kidnapper will think it's Mrs. Wallace. Will think Mrs. Wallace got in touch with him. Then there's no telling what might happen to Mary. But we can't handle this all by ourselves, Elizabeth exclaimed. I mean, if Mary really has been kidnapped, her life is in danger. At that instant, the doorbell rang. Downstairs, the twins heard Amy Sutton's voice, and a moment later her footsteps on the stairs. Hi, Elizabeth, Amy said cheerfully, coming into the room. Hi, Jessica. She sat down on Elizabeth's bed. Elizabeth, I have a problem. Elizabeth bit her lip. You've got a problem? She asked, glancing at the note. Yeah, it's about Mary Wallace. Mary? Elizabeth and Jessica repeated at the same time. Amy glanced from one twin to the other, looking a little puzzled. Yes, Mary. Listen, the other day, Jessica leaned forward. Do you know where she is? Have you heard from her? Elizabeth asked eagerly. No, Amy replied. I haven't heard from her. That's my problem. Oh, Jessica sighed. Whew. Elizabeth shook her head. Amy frowned at the twins and then continued. Remember the interview with Coach Castles that I'm writing for the Sixers? Amy asked Elizabeth. Elizabeth nodded. What about it? Is it finished? Yes, it's finished, Amy replied. But my mom's typewriter is broken and I gave the article to Mary to type. Now, I can't find Mary anywhere. She's disappeared into thin air. Elizabeth and Jessica exchanged looks. Hey, what's going on? Amy asked, sensing that something was disturbing the twins. You guys look upset. Is everything okay? Elizabeth looked at Jessica and raised her eyebrows. Jessica nodded. Tell her, Jessica said. Elizabeth picked up the pad and handed it to Amy. What would you say about this? She asked. Amy read the words out loud. Your daughter is safe. We'll be in touch soon. Don't call police. She looked up at the twins, grinning. All right, she said. What's up? Who have you kidnapped? Mary Wallace? She looked around the room. I'll bet you've got her in the closet, huh? It's not a joke, Amy, Jessica soberly. Jessica's right, Elizabeth said. This is for real. She told Amy about the newspaper and about what Jessica had seen in Mary's room. And Mrs. Wallace is acting really weird, Jessica added. She won't tell anyone where Mary is or when she'll be back. Amy frowned. You know, she said slowly, there's something else too. I saw Mrs. Wallace at the bank yesterday. At the bank? Elizabeth asked. Yes. I was there with my mom, and Mrs. Wallace was standing in the next line. I noticed that she looked awfully worried. Maybe she was taking out money to pay the ransom. For the kidnapper's ransom, of course, Jessica agreed. I think you're both jumping into conclusions. Both to conclusion, Elizabeth said. But it makes sense, Jessica insisted. Don't you see? The kidnapper took Mary, then sent the note to her mother. And now Mrs. Wallace has to pay a ransom to get Mary back. She shook her head. All of that is really obvious. My only question is who would want to kidnap Mary? Suddenly, Amy snapped her fingers. I know, she exclaimed. I know who would want to do it. You do? Elizabeth and Jessica asked in unison. Of course, Amy declared. Annie DeSalvo. Elizabeth gave her a doubtful look. Annie DeSalvo? Isn't she the woman who kidnapped Mary before? Jessica exclaimed, finishing Elizabeth's sentence. When Mary was a little girl, why didn't I think of that? That's right, Amy said. Makes sense to me, Jessica said with a nod. Elizabeth wasn't convinced. Do you actually think, she asked slowly, that Annie Del Salvo kidnapped Mary again? Why would she do that? Maybe she's mad at Mary's mom, Amy offered. Maybe she found out that Mrs. Wallace and Mary are together again, and she's angry about it. Or maybe she misses Mary, Jessica suggested and wants her back. Or maybe she thinks this is an easy way to make some money, Amy added. I can think of lots of reasons. That's right, Jessica said, but the facts all point to one thing. Mary's been kidnapped, and Annie Del Salvo did it. Elizabeth stood up. In that case, she said, we have to call the police. But we can't, Jessica wailed. That could put Mary's life in danger. I'm with Elizabeth, Amy said. Annie Del Salvo probably wouldn't hurt Mary. I think it's safe to tell the police. But we don't know for sure that the kidnapper is Annie Del Salvo, Jessica objected. We're only guessing, and anyway, even if it is Annie Del Salvo, she could run away with Mary again any time. If she thinks Mrs. Wallace called the police, she might take Mary someplace nobody would ever find her. Elizabeth was trying to think of a compromise. Maybe we could call Officer Carey? She said finally. We could just tell him Mary's been missing for a couple of days and we're worried that something's happened to her. Jessica looked half convinced. She knew Officer Carey. He had recently helped the twins find a stolen scrapbook that belonged to Mrs. Harrington, an actress friend of theirs. I think that's a good idea, Amy said. We don't have to tell him about the note or who we suspect. Well, all right, Jessica said reluctantly. A few minutes later, Elizabeth hung up the telephone. Officer Carey said he would look into the situation himself, she told Jessica and Amy with a smile. And he said it was wonderful that we were so concerned about a friend. He'll call back when he's got something to tell us. Amy glanced at her watch. Well, I can't stay for another hour, she said. I hope he'll call back before then. Me too, Elizabeth said. We could go swimming while we're waiting. That's a great idea, Amy said, but I'll have to borrow a suit from you. The girls changed into their suits and went out to the backyard. Amy and Elizabeth splashed around in the Wakefield's pool with Elizabeth, while Jessica rather sat on the patio looking through a fashion magazine. A little while later, Stephen came out and called Elizabeth to the phone. Elizabeth dashed inside. Oh, I shouldn't have shouted that one. Elizabeth dashed inside, and the other girls followed. It was Officer Carey. I just wanted to tell you, he said, that I talked with Mary Wallace's mother personally just a few minutes ago. She assured me that everything is fine. Mary has gone away with some friends. Mrs. Wallace expects her daughter back sometime very soon. He paused. So it doesn't look like we have a missing person case. Elizabeth, just a case of a girl taking a trip. Elizabeth inhaled deeply. Okay, Officer Carey, she said. Thanks for checking. She put down the phone and turned to the others. Mary's mom told him that everything's just fine, she said slowly. She said that Mary's on a trip and she'll be home soon. So we're right back where we started, Jessica moaned. No, we're not, Elizabeth replied. I trust Officer Carey. If he thought something was wrong, he would have told us. But he wouldn't find out if something's wrong just by checking with Mary's mother, Jessica pointed out. She isn't going to tell him anything. She's following the kidnapper's instructions. Anyway, what about the note? Elizabeth frowned. There could be other explanations for the note, she said. Maybe it's part of a game that somebody's playing, like a scavenger hunt or something like that. If it's a game, it's the weirdest game ever, Jessica complained. And what about the money Mrs. Wallace took out of the bank? Elizabeth folded her arms over her chest. Well, we don't know how much money it was or whether it had anything to do with Mary, she reminded her twin. I vote we drop the whole thing. I guess. I agree with Elizabeth, Amy said reluctantly. I mean, we don't have any real evidence. That's right, Elizabeth said. Mary will probably be back at school on Monday. Well, I don't think she will be, Jessica said firmly. I think there's something weird about the way Mrs. Wallace is acting. I think the note is a ransom note and that Annie Del Salvo wrote it. Besides, if Mary knew she was going away, she would have let us know she'd be missing the unicorn meeting, and she probably would have called Amy too about her article. Well, let's just wait for now, Elizabeth replied reasonably. If Mary's not back at school soon, we'll think of something to do. Yeah, Amy agreed. Agreed. We'll think of something. Right. So it's 1 hour now. We're gonna stop for now. We're gonna charge our phone and get ready for the next lot. Okay? And we'll see you soon. Bye. This is the end of part 1.